Hello everyone, TLSG here, back again with another daily Marvel Snap video. So we recently had a big bomb of new cards dropped on us that are going to be coming to Marvel Snap very soon. And they're going to be released in Series 4 and Series 5. So I took a little while to brew on and think about the different cards that they announced. And we're going to do our first take at a video form of a tier list. Today we're going to be creating a tier list for the 10 cards that they're going to be releasing alongside the collector's tokens in Series 4. We'll do a separate video on Series 5 shortly, but I wanted to cover these fairly quickly because there are some really good cards that are going to be released very soon. And so the first card that we're going to be categorizing is Absorbing Man. Now, Absorbing Man is a 4-cost, 3-power that has the on reveal. If the last card you played has an on reveal ability, this card copies it. So this is like a Mystique, but for on reveal cards. Now, when you think about all of the really strong on reveal cards that we have, this can get really crazy very fast. So if you're copying a Hazmat in a debris junk deck that runs one of the other cards that are going to be released in Series 4, if you're running a Black Panther, a Gamora, a White Tiger, you could start really stacking some insanely strong on reveal cards. However, this does have the downside of being able to be countered pretty heavily by Cosmo. And so because of that, I'm going to put it in A tier. If we didn't have the hard counters of Cosmo, or it wasn't able to be pulled around the board with Magneto, I think this would be a solid S, and I still think it can be if the opponent is not running something that can counter this card. And then next up we have Agent Coulson. Agent Coulson is a 3-cost, 4-power card that has the on reveal, add a random 4 and 5-cost card to your hand. So this is pretty decent value. You know that you're going to keep a good curve. You'll be able to play on 3, on 4, and on 5 if you have this in your hand by turn 3. And so I think it will see a decent amount of play, but the drawback for me is that it does rely very heavily on an RNG element, and those are hard to build consistent decks around because it's not a solid flat amount of power. It's not a solid effect. Sometimes this is going to absolutely break the game wide open for you. Other times you're going to draw into a Mr. Negative and a 5-cost card that doesn't really benefit you in any way, shape, or form. And so this one I think will see play, but I don't think it's going to see as much competitive play. And so for that, I'm going to put Agent Coulson in tier C. And next up, I think I'm probably going to butcher this name, but we have Adama. Correct me in the comment section down below. And Adama is a 4-cost, 10-power card. If you have another card here at the end of your turn, destroy this. Now, initially to me, this felt similar to like a Namor in that if you had this as your only card, it was good. It had quite a bit of power, but if you played anything else there was a pretty decent negative downside to it. But then as I thought about it more, as I continued brewing, I think there are going to be a couple of really good uses with this card. So the first one being as a ramp into a Professor X. If you need a guy that's going to push early power so that you can then follow it up with a Professor X, this is going to be your guy. Because after Professor X comes down, he's going to lock down the lane, and then he won't be able to be destroyed. And then in addition to that, you could use a 0 with this to cancel out his ability. At that point, he becomes similar to a Typhoid Mary. And then also you can just run an armor, and that is going to protect him from being destroyed. You can use this in locations like Wakanda. He won't be able to be destroyed. And so I think he's a little bit more flexible in his power. If this was an ongoing ability, I think he would fit very well into the Spectrum Destroyer ongoing style deck list. But without that, I think he does have a place, but I don't think it's going to be in every single deck. And so I think he is a solid B tier, that he's going to see a decent amount of play, but he's not going to define the meta by himself. Now keep in mind that these are just my opinions. There could be very viable decks that get drafted along with these cards, but after my first impressions and thinking through the cards we currently have, these are going to be my rankings. If you disagree, let me know in the comment section down below why. I am very open to differing opinions, and maybe my take was off, but these are my initial takes. And so the next one that we have is Helicarrier. Helicarrier is a 6-cost, 10-power card that has the effect when you discard this from your hand, add 3 random cards to your hand. Now this is another really cool effect, but I think it's hard to use consistently. Anytime you add in RNG elements, similar to a Nick Fury, using that one competitively or consistently becomes difficult. Now, I think there will be some play around potential with this alongside maybe a Devil Dino and a Lady Sif / Ghost Rider to resummon this card on that final turn. I think you can keep a really big hand size and push a pretty decent second power card, but I still think overall I think it's going to struggle to find its place. And so for this one, I'm teetering between B and C, but again, I'm gonna put this one in C, which I feel really harsh about, but we are going to put it in C just because of the RNG elements that it has associated with it. And then next up we have Luke Cage, the Luke Cage. Now this one I've known about for a while. I've known kind of some of the abilities or stat lines. This one is going to be a 2-cost 1-power card with the ongoing ability your cards can't have their power reduced. Initially, I feel like everybody jumps straight towards a hazmat build, which, yes, this is going to be phenomenal in a debris junk hazmat build. You're no longer going to be negatively impacting your cards, so all of a sudden that hazmat play, instead of being like 4 or 5 value for you, it's now going to be 10, 12 value across the board, which is a massive improvement, especially if you hit it with a Wong or an Odin. You're just going to be able to break that one wide open. But there are also some other kind of cool interactions that I'm curious about with this list. One of them being, how does Luke Cage operate with a lizard? After they hit that criteria, does your lizard still drop down to 2 power or does it stay at 5? Can you use this alongside a Typhoid Mary to push a 4-cost 10-power card and not have the downside of that ongoing ability? I think those are some of the cool interactions that I'm looking forward to building and brewing around with Luke Cage. But I think he's going to be fairly solid, but I do think he'll have a limited kind of archetype set of play. And so for that, I'm going to put him as a solid B tier. And next up we have Mariah Hill. And she's a 2-cost 3-power card that has the on reveal ability, add a random 1-cost card to your hand. Now sometimes these 1-cost cards are not going to be very beneficial. You will likely get something kind of unimpactful, and just overall if you're running a deck that curves out well, this is another kind of RNG element to it, but it's also a kind of low stat line for a 2-3. It's kind of middle of the ground, so nothing great there. You don't know if you're going to get a great 1-cost card in return. You might get a 0 that you just find unplayable, or a Blade, and they could be running a Killmonger that destroys it anyways. This one, it just seems like it's going to be very tough to use. Now, one interaction of note with Mariah Hill is that you will be able to use Quinjet alongside it, and that 1-cost card that you get, since it didn't start in your deck, will be free. And so you can get a little bit of upside, but I still think it's going to be very difficult to use consistently. And I'm sorry, Mariah, I got to do it. I'm going to put you in D tier. I think with the potential impact of that RNG aspect, I just don't think it's going to see a lot of play, at least not with my initial impression. And then next up we have M'Baku. And this one's going to be very short and sweet. It's a 1-cost 2-power card that has a really cool effect of, if this card is in your deck at the end of the game, it jumps to a random location. But with 12 cards, and you typically draw 9 of them by the end of the game, if you don't have any kind of draw locations or draw effects, I think M'Baku is bad. So we're going to put him in D tier. And then next up we have Orca. Orca is like a really big late game Namor. He's a 6-cost 9-power card that has the ongoing ability plus 5 power if this is your only card here. Now it's going to be a potential 14-power play on that last turn, but you can't have any other cards there. If the opponent has a debris, you can no longer trigger this ongoing ability. I think it's cool in concept, but I don't think it's going to see very much consistent play, because how often is 14 power enough to win a lane? Sometimes it absolutely will be, but I think most of the time it's just going to fall a little flat as a last turn play. And so for this one, I'm going to put him in C tier. And then next up on the list, we have She-Hulk. She-Hulk was rumored to be released quite a while ago alongside the Disney Plus series for She-Hulk. And she's going to be a 6-cost 10-power card that has the ability, costs 1 less for each unspent energy last turn. This one has a lot of brewing possibilities. I think she's going to be very, very solid. Now you could do something cheeky with like a Moon Girl to get that high roll. You could extend the game on 5 with magic, skip on 6. You're going to have 2 free She-Hulks to play on 7 along with some other big play, or you can use her in a Death Wave style deck. And if her interaction works the same way that Death does, which it should based on the wording, whenever you play Wave on 5, that's going to bring her down to 4. If Wave was the only thing you played on 5, you have 2 additional energy. That's going to bring her down to 2. You could then do that alongside a death, or she's very similar to the death in that she would go down to 2, even if she didn't have any cards that were destroyed. If you had 4 cards that were destroyed during the game, you could do her, your death would be free, and then you can still do a Taskmaster or an Arrow or another big late game play to push a lot of power on a turn where you should only be able to drop 1 card. I think She-Hulk is going to be very, very impactful in what she does. And so for that, and the fact that you can't inherently counter her with like a Cosmo or a Wave or anything specifically, I'm going to put her at S tier tentatively. She could easily fall down to an A tier, but I think the fact that you're going to be able to high roll so much power on one of those final turns that I think that puts her in a very, very competitive spot. And then the last one that we have is Titania. So Titania is a 1-cost 5-power card, which is massive. That is almost an Ebony Maw. But she has the negative ability of when any card is played at this location, this card switches sides. So you can use this a couple of ways. You can either use this in like a debris junk deck that floods the opponent's board, and then you use this in a capped out lane so that you don't have any downside from playing her. She can't get bounced back and forth, and you could just fill up the rest of your location. Or if you're running up against a Cerebro deck and you have Titania in your deck, and it's a Cerebro 3, which with some of the Series 5 cards, I think we will see a lot of Cerebro 3s. Titania will be able to jump to their side of the board, becomes a 5-power card on their board, it breaks their Cerebro, and so you could do this alongside one other card on the final turn to basically break your opponent's Cerebro of anything less than 5. I think this one has some really, really cool possibilities. I think she's going to be pretty solid in a lot of builds, but I don't think she's going to impact the widespread game. I think in the decks that she will kind of be built in, she'll be really strong. Then the fact that you can also use this alongside a Sarah Miracle deck to make sure that you get the upside of using her last, I think she's going to be very strong. I'm going to put her at A tier. She could potentially be B tier, but she is going to see quite a bit of play, and she's going to be very impactful. And so as far as the tier list goes, I would say that She-Hulk would probably be my #1 pull from Series 4, just because of the impact that she has. After that, maybe Absorbing Man or Titania, or because I like Debris so much, I may go with a combination of like Luke Cage and Titania to have some really big, powerful last turn plays. But I think we have some really solid cards to start brewing around and building around, and I'm really excited for this update to hit, and I am so excited to cover these cards as we pull them. But that is the Series 4 tier list for all of the cards that they announced in their most recent update video. As we get more information, as Series 4 changes, I'll continue to update these. Let me know if you like this style of video. If so, I'll continue to do these as we get more cards, as more cards are moved out of these series and more cards are moved into them. I'll continue to make updates periodically if this is content that you guys enjoy. But as always, I hope that you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to leave it a like and a comment down below. As always, this has been TLSG. Later, guys.